Well, good people, ready or not, fall is here. The fish and, well, quite a few plants have been brought inside, and is that a peanut? Alright, I'm wearing the red cap again because we're harvesting again, and today we're harvesting these. Put all these things together and you know that fall is here. And of course that means it's also time for cider and spooky stories. So stay tuned because we've got a doozy for you. A short story I wrote about events that occurred over the past winter. Spooky stuff added for entertainment purposes only. Now, as this is a radio play, you can treat it just like a podcast and listen to it with no visual stimulation whatsoever. But if you are going to take advantage of the visuals, I would recommend that you watch on the largest screen possible, dim the lights, and it'll make sense later, but try to pay attention to the candle. I run a small gardening channel for a popular video streaming platform. It doesn't make much money, usually $1 or $2 a day from ad revenue, but it adds up to tools and seeds over time, and I occasionally sell a plant or two from our online store. My wife claims that my gardening efforts serve to keep me busy so that I don't get any real work done. My latest project almost had me agreeing with her. I'd hit upon a fantastic idea to capture rainwater and reduce the amount of supplemental watering that needed to be done. The scheme involved digging irrigation trenches between established garden beds and then backfilling them with wood chips to create a weed-free walkway that could also store a few weeks' worth of water. I was well into the excavation when I realized that our property had an interesting history. This valley was all one single large farm before real estate developers subdivided into housing for returning veterans of the Second World War. I unearthed the remains of what I presumed to be a well house. In one area I found bits of crumbling green shingles from the roof, handmade bricks that had served as the foundation, and bits of terracotta pipe where the water had once flowed forth from the pump to irrigate the crops. The pump had either been removed long ago or had rusted away. I couldn't discern which from my observations. Bits of broken glass from what must have been the windows of the small building were a frequent find. I began to imagine myself a sort of archaeologist, gently peeling back the layers of soil and uncovering the secret history of the land. I had just finished removing a piece of broken concrete slab that may have been poured to be the floor of the structure when I found it. At first I thought I'd uncovered a dog's treat, one of those bones that one gets from the butcher shop that was chewed upon for a day, then promptly buried and forgotten. It was of the appropriate length, cut off on one side, leaving a knobby joint on the opposite side that bore of close resemblance to the narrow end of a human femur. I naturally checked against my own leg and saw that this bone was much smaller and had most likely, I thought at the time, come from a pig. Any other possibilities didn't make much sense. As I said, it was just the one bone that I found there and nothing else. I placed it beside the workings with the other artifacts my labors had produced. Broken glass, pottery, the odd nail, and bit of busted concrete that littered this portion of the yard. At the end of the day, when the sun had dropped behind the lifeless hackberry trees to the west and the air in the hollow began to get uncomfortably cold, I packed all of my tools into the shed, closed the door, and came inside for the night, without giving that bone a single thought. When I commenced work again the next midday, because mornings were still too chilly, I was surprised to see that the door to the tool shed was open. I was absolutely certain that I had closed it tightly the night before, but there it was. I admit a certain sickening sense of worry that someone had broken into the shed overnight, but a quick look over the contents revealed nothing amiss. I resumed work farther away from the well house, and within just a few minutes I dug up a marble. One of those beads that a glassblower might wind together from several colored canes, cut and roll out by hand as a shooter. This one was made mainly of a deep ruby with stripes of clear and pale yellow glass swirling throughout it. Not large as some, but with a skilled wrist, large enough to play with. After rubbing the dirt off the glassy sphere, I went to place it on the pile of other artifacts that were the spoils of my amateur antiquarianism. I should have noticed then, but curiously I didn't. The excitement of finding new treasure captured my attention. I spent the day quarrying out an assortment of patent medicine bottles, some broken, some intact, soda bottles in that old style where the writing was cast in raised letters, even though the paint had long worn off, and a half a dozen more marbles, no two alike. Only after I'd once again secured my tools in the tool shed, double-checking that it was indeed closed this time, before gathering all the marbles together to bring inside. Only then did it occur to me that the odd bone that I had retrieved from the ground yesterday was missing. I searched the site diligently, looking into the trenches and about the surface of the raised beds, but there was no trace to be found. Back inside the house that night, I couldn't help but think about that bone. The cut-in didn't have the mostly smooth edge of a butcher's bandsaw, at least not in my recollection, but appeared to have been made by a smaller blade, like a hacksaw, cutting into the bone from several angles until finally worrying it in two. Lying in bed, unable to sleep, I thought about our yard and the fence that surrounds it. We have no dog, nothing that might pick up a stray, dry bone and play with it. Had someone or something come along last night, opened the tool shed, taken the bone and left, without disturbing anything else? I don't consider myself an overly sensitive person, but I found the thought chilling. I've seen bones that dogs have gnawed on, and as hard as I tried, I couldn't recall seeing teeth marks on the absent bone. What did I find yesterday? Was the last thought in mind when sleep overtook me. One might imagine that with such strange and foreboding thoughts as occupied my weary mind at day's end, I might be in store for nightmares. But instead I found myself enjoying a dream of being a young boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years of age, playing with my marbles beside the old well house. Inhabiting the perspective of the boy who owned the marbles, I experienced a warm summer afternoon, drenched my head in the flow of water from the spigot on the side of the well house to cool off, and saw an older man approaching. I assumed this must be the boy's father. The man leads the boy, me in the dream, away from the well house and away from the marbles and the dust, saying something about chores needing to be done. It is at this point that my perspective and the boy's perspective split, and I'm observing as the boy is led off to the dark farmhouse in the distance. This sudden change jolts my conscious mind somewhat, just enough that a sound from the waking world slips into my dream. The laughter of a child. One hears of people having strange experiences when in that middle kingdom between the land of dreams and the waking world, how, when still caught up in Morpheus's embrace, we seem to behold some fragment of the phantasmal before our waking eyes. Yes, I've heard the same, but I tell you in all candor, I was wide awake as a shot with the sound of laughter still ringing in my ears. The house was otherwise empty, no children, no guests, just a fussy tabby cat that couldn't be troubled to stir unless it was noon and someone else had breakfast ready. I quickly threw on my robe and made my way towards where I'd heard the sound emanating, the kitchen. I approached that room with no small sense of trepidation because, as I've said, to me, that sound of laughter had seemed very real and not a product of hypnagogic trickery. My reasoning was sound, is sound, I should say, and I can explain it in this way. At that final moment, as I saw the boy being led away, our eyes met. In his eyes, I saw what I can only imagine to be a look of fear, and not something that would explain hearing laughter at all. As my fingers found the light switch, I half expected to see the boy from my dream standing in the kitchen, but the light revealed not a soul. All about the kitchen, from the countertop down, drawers had been pulled open and cabinet doors were ajar. As had been the case with the tool shed, nothing seemed to be missing. On further inspection, I confirmed that the house doors were locked, all the windows latched, and no other apparent means of entry could be found. In short, no one else had been in the house. The winter storm kept me at home for 2 days, but following its passage I returned to work. I was shooting video all this time, attempting to make a decent presentation of my idea, and constantly running into difficulties. The wireless microphone that I purchased to deal with windy days, a constant hazard for the outdoor videographer, simply would not transmit to its receiver. Cell phone signals are somewhat unreliable in the valley too, so this was not a completely unexpected issue. However, it made it necessary to switch back to a shotgun microphone. And then the camera's USB port fell out. Despite the technical difficulties, I kept digging and kept finding other items. Old milk bottles, the sort that the creameries used to bring by and leave on one's doorstep once upon a time. And the zinc seals that once covered those bottles, still embossed with the logo of the creamery. I looked it up. They're still in business. Not too far away from the milk bottles, my shovel struck something hard and metallic. A heavily corroded railroad spike. I brought the thing into the house with the intention of cleaning it up, and now I'm not sure that I should have. A search of historical records for the area revealed that the KD Railroad had once passed just 40 yards north. Beef from Texas would have passed this spot almost daily, feeding the supply chain in Kansas City, and then onward to the great slaughterhouses in Chicago. After reading about the railroad line, I retired for the evening. I thought about how that train must have sounded, rumbling along so close by day after day. The spring for which the neighborhood town draws its name lay just a little farther down the tracks, and it's entirely possible that one might have been standing in this very place years ago, watching the cattle cramped in those cars, bound east and north to their doom, waiting in the sweltering heat for the train to finish taking on water, so that the journey could continue. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I imagined the sound of the cattle lowing in the cars, the injured ones with some urgency calling out for help that was never going to come. At some point, the train would finish filling its boilers, and the grim procession would go on. The wheels would screech on the steel rails, and the train's whistle would sound deafeningly throughout the valley. I don't know why, but the thought came to me that if anyone were to scream while that train was picking up speed, no one would hear a thing. No one at all. Perhaps I was already asleep, and this was just the beginning of another dream. If I think on it, maybe I can remember how it went. I was looking through the eyes of the boy on the farm again, this time walking along the railroad tracks, perhaps coming home from school in the afternoon. Close by the railroad magnet, I see a spike that's come loose. I pick it up and carry it away, playing with it. In the field nearby, close to the well house, I find myself pounding the spike into the ground with a new, shiny hammer. In that mysterious way of dreamers, I could tell that the hammer belonged to the boy's, my father, and that I, the boy, was very specifically not supposed to be playing with it. As the dream progresses, my viewpoint and the boy's diverge once more, and I watch him leave his play to run back towards the dark farmhouse in the distance. The hammer is left on the ground, and I watch as the seasons change. Rain and snow fall down upon it, and the shiny metal turns to rust. A loud, banging sound, as if from a slamming door, awakened me. Again, my sense was that the sound had originated in the kitchen. Once again, I put on my robe and made my way to the aforementioned room. One of the cupboard doors above the countertop was open, and lying on the floor beneath it was one of the dining room chairs, turned on its side, almost as if it had fallen there just moments before. I like to believe that I'm a rational man and that everything happens for some kind of reason. But I am at a loss to explain. No, just wait. The doors were closed, all of them, locked from the inside. All windows were securely latched from within. There are no secret doors, trap doors, or basement entrances to the house. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could have gotten in to move that chair. No children, no pets. But there it was. February came, and with it the worst of the cold and snow. I spent my days during that bleak month keeping the wood stove stoked. If there were any mischievous, ghostly children about, the cold seemed to have driven them off, for there were no other incidents during that 2-week cold snap. By spring, I had nearly forgotten about the bizarre goings-on, and then the old farmhouse, the original farmhouse, came up on the market. The buyers held a rummage sale to dispose of its contents. The old house had been featured in at least 2 disturbing dreams that I had had over the winter months, so I felt some stirrings of curiosity for the place. On a whim, I decided to have a browse through the house goods that had not already been thoroughly picked over. As fortune would have it, the attic had gone largely overlooked by the first wave of bargain seekers, and there was still a fair amount of clutter beneath the rafters. On top of an antique office desk, I found a wooden box, more of a crate than a chest, with an equally antique padlock securing it. I suspected that I could get the box open easily enough, even without a key, just a screwdriver and a bit of time. I had no idea what might be in the box, but from my experience with these sorts of sales, they will take just about whatever money you have in your pockets, as long as you promise to immediately remove whatever you purchased. As it happened, I had $5 in my pocket, and that is what the board attendant took for the crate, 2 feet wide, 2 feet broad, and 18 inches deep. Contents unknown. Now, I am no burglar or safecracker, but I felt incredibly clever when I opened that crate. The hinges had been placed so that the screws holding them in place were exposed. A few screws removed, and the hinges came free. Inside was a box of embossed paper poker chips, a deck of vintage World War II Plane Spotter playing cards, and a photo album. The chips and cards might be of value to a collector, but unless the album was stuffed full of rare baseball cards, that was about it. I opened the dry leather folio and found its fragile leaves papered with black and white photographs going back to the very beginning of the last century. The pictures began with the farmhouse, sepia-toned but newly framed. There was a young man and woman in some of these, 1920s-era clothing and cars. I saw pictures of the railroad and the trains that were on it, belching steam and black smoke. A few pages in, and the woman appeared holding a baby. The man appeared astride a tractor, working a field near the well house. The same well house that I had found the remains of. New house, new tractor, new clothes, and everyone was smiling. After a few more pages, the baby had become a toddler, and the mother was canning something, jam perhaps, and the father was beginning to look more and more like the man I had seen in my dream. Not exactly, but somehow similar. By the middle of the album, the boy in the photographs was beginning to look more closely like the boy from my dream. There were several pictures featuring him, and I noticed the house, the tractor, the clothing, everything began to seem more worn. The man and woman still smiled, with plenty of cheer in the holiday photos, but not as much in the rest. If I had to guess, the young couple had moved on to the farm in the mid-1920s when there was plenty of money to be had and everything began all right. But by the late 20s and early 30s, the financial troubles had begun. I turned the pages further and saw the family attempting to survive through the Dust Bowl years of the mid-30s. The land grew dry and cracked. In one photograph, the man is seen standing upright in a crevice that passes under the well house. Its concrete flooring is collapsed, and the expression on the man's face just seems to say, well, that's it then. The boy doesn't appear in any of these pictures, and the woman disappears from the album shortly afterwards. The last photograph shows the farmhouse surrounded in dust and men working outside with surveyor's equipment, the day the farmland was sold. As you know, I had to spend some time away towards the end of the summer. I'm back from the hospital now, and I'm feeling much better. I've been cautioned against too much strain or excitement, but the doctors say that I can garden again. It's been quiet, with no more episodes of strangeness in the kitchen for some time. I don't know what's become of the marbles I excavated from the garden, but that isn't really what troubles me right now in any case. You see, this morning I found the door of the tool shed standing open again. I searched and didn't see any sign that anything had been taken, but there, lying on the floor of the tool shed, covered in dirt and rust, I saw something odd. It was a rusty, old hammer.